Hello, this is Christina Barr. You're watching Black Tea News. Hello, welcome to Black Tea News. I'm your host, Christina Barr, and I apologize for being late, but something happened that had me so tickled that I just had to look a little more into it and talk about it today. And so they lied to us is about the jab, and of course Pfizer and all them, how they were saying, oh, our vaccines, they prevent the spread by I don't know, it was up into the 90s when they announced it. Do you remember when they announced it, like right after it was evident that Trump had no path to victory after he had lost and was doing his court hearings, et cetera, blah, blah, blah. So there was a point when something in the court got shot down and it was evident that he had no path forward, I guess. And then Pfizer and all of them's like, oh, by the way, we have this vaccine and they gave out the stats in it, whatever. Okay, so there was a video that's been circulating around in the EU Parliament of someone from Pfizer saying that they didn't test to see how much it was going to actually spread. So that's been going around, and so the Washington Post kind of, I guess, talked about it a bit in a buried sort of story on Sunday. So Ben Shapiro was talking about it, and so I was listening to his show, and he was talking. His show is called "They Lied," and I think mine, I named it "We Tried to Tell You," or I don't remember exactly what I just called this episode, but I just I haven't listened to his whole show, but where I ended it, he said if he had known the information, he doesn't know if he would have got vaccinated. And I'm very grateful that the Daily Wire was against the mandates, and I'm very grateful that they sued the Biden administration and did all that stuff. I wish I could have heard the debates between Matt and Michael, particularly Michael and Ben. I'm sure maybe they had thorough discussions on it. I don't know, but I wish I would have saw some of that in fighting, because Michael was just like, and Ben was, at one point, Ben was, you're a bad religious person if you don't follow the mandates and stuff. And I'm not joking. So I wrote an article about this some time ago, and I said, because Ben Shapiro has a list of times when he's been wrong, and I wrote an article saying, here's my submission. So I want to go back to that and just talk about the turn of events with this. Because I'm sure there's a lot of people out there who owe you an apology, who owe a lot of people an apology. There's a lot of people who need to be fired. There's a lot of people who never need to hold office again. Unfortunately, that probably isn't the case in a lot of the situation, but at least I guess we have our I told you so's. Also, Katie Hobbs' twin sister, Project Veritas, which they're so good at their job. It's amazing how they get all these people to say this stuff on camera. Admitted that the Democrats wanted Kari Lake, who's probably going to win, to be the nominee because they figured that she was a better candidate to run against. And it's pretty amazing, all the sort of stuff that Project Veritas gets. And I want to talk about that because it was a Democrat strategy. And the fact that Democrats were trying to prop up certain candidates really lends to the fact that this whole narrative about threat to democracy, et cetera, is just really ridiculous. It's really ridiculous. But before we jump into the news of the day, please go to blacktnews.com, check out different content at my website. Please check out different merchandise that we got at the store, like Pro Choice Men Are Sus, as in Suspect. We got the Rogue KC boarded stuff. We still got those pumpkin spice season mugs and all kinds of goodies you guys can get at the website. If you like what I do here, please consider leaving a donation at blacktnews.com/donate. Please check out different articles that I have and share those. I wrote one about CNN talking about election denial. We talked a bit about it yesterday. They only included people from 2020 election, not 2016. Not Stacey Abrams, who's running for office and is the most prolific election denier running, I would say. But they didn't want to do an article on her, so they just made it to about 2020, which is so very convenient if you're not accepting the results of the election and all that stuff is a threat to democracy. I don't understand how Stacey Abrams doesn't make the cut, especially when you go on to say that the results happen the way that they did, or you're scared of the results that happen because your enemy is racist and the Jim Crow 2.0 with their laws, etc. And so not only do you deny elections, you also stoke racial tensions as well. So I think Stacey Abrams is a lot worse than other people who they had on the list, like Kristi Noem, who actually attended Joe Biden's inauguration and congratulated him. But whatever, you can check out that article. Make sure that you share that stuff around. I want to thank Bright Mission Pack. I'm in their studio today. If I say something today that triggers you, nobody cares. They certainly don't care. But I do appreciate the work that they do. But they did like to uplift conservative voices, so that's why I'm here. I've been in the studio for more than a year, and God bless them. They do great work. They really, really do. I'm looking forward to being with a lot of the PAC members tonight as we watch the debate tonight with Gretchen Whitmer and Tudor Dixon. I'm hoping that Tudor pulls out another victory because she certainly did the last time. And so I have my hopes up now, and I hope she doesn't deflate me. Before we jump into the news, you guys know that I like to start with a meme. And so George Alexopoulos did this little meme here. Well, not a meme, but a comic. And so you got glue and tomato soup and security, and then the people who look suspect, and then they just let them through. And so if you're unaware of what's been happening, people who are climate activists have been throwing their soup, I guess, and also there was like potatoes on like priceless work of art. Well, it's not priceless. There's a value attached to it. So they should go to jail if they can't pay that price. Yes, I think these people who are doing these acts of terror should go to jail. I do. But you see some people in the media like cheering them on. But there's the question, like, where is security with this situation? Like, it's not like they're like totally inconspicuous when they go to these galleries and they have these, orange and white vests and whatever, or they're coming in with their glue and their, like, don't people go through some kind of security when they go to these places? And then they just ruin this stuff, and then they glue themselves to the floor. So throw some harsh penalties on these folks, and it'll probably stop a lot of the stuff. I saw a TikToker, and they're pretty like left. And they were huge account was talking about how this kind of stuff is really stupid, because this performative nonsense is making more people think that they're a joke, and they're already a joke. But optics do matter. People who do protests and all that stuff, people who are successful with that stuff, because a lot of people have marches, a lot of people have protests, a lot of people go through the ages doing this stuff. There's a protest, like when Trump was in office and I go visit my sister, like they're having a protest there. She's like, they have a protest every day. Like having a protest every day. People protest stuff all the time, but how effective you are in your movement, it's like, how many people can you lobby with behind the scenes? How much money can you raise? How many people can you actually drive out to vote? There's so much more a part of it. You protest and you march to raise awareness, to get more signatures collected to rally, the army for your cause so you can continue to do other stuff. There's strategy behind it. Doing this kind of nonsense is just making people be like, man, you guys are really annoying. You're talking about people are dying and you're wasting potatoes on paintings. It's just really ridiculous. So they shouldn't allow this to continue, and I don't understand how people keep getting past security, but he did a good, little ditty on what I think everyone is asking. So congrats there. So anyway, back to the Ben Shapiro thing. So if you're just popping in, I was just listening to Ben's show, not too like on my way over here, and so he was talking about how the Washington Post wrote a story, dropped it on Sunday, I believe, about Biden's like beginning days in office, and so within it they talk about a bit about um understanding how kind of COVID was going and how they would play around it, etc., and the different decisions that they would make. But ultimately, due to that story and the European Union, and we played it on the show before when this was like breaking, questioning someone from Pfizer and asking, "Hey, did you guys really test how well this was going to stop transmission before it went to market?" And then she's like, no. She starts laughing. She's like, we had to move at the speed of science. And it's like, what? You didn't move at the speed of science. You moved at the speed of your money. Like, it wasn't the science. If you didn't have the data to stop this stuff, then why? And so Ben is flipping out because he's saying, well, Moderna and all that, they said, hey, it'll stop. It has like a 90 something percent stop transmission rate or whatever. And people were putting out these data and the numbers, and so Ben was going by the data. And so his thing is, he was going at the data at the time. He's like, maybe people who didn't want to go by the data and didn't trust it at the time proved to be right, obviously. But is it unwise to have gone with the data that was presented? I guess I can't fault them exactly for it, but I recall very early, very early, there was like a Time magazine, New York Times article or something, maybe it was Washington Post, but there were articles that were saying that if you can get it, if you have the vaccine, you can still spread it. And I don't remember exactly if they had like the number rates in it, but they just let it be known that you can still spread it. So whatever amount that was, I was just from jump. And I mean, this was super early when they started doing the vaccines. I didn't see a lot of articles afterwards with this in it, but I remember posting it somewhere on my page or somewhere about how you could still pass COVID even if you have the jab. So if that was the case, I kept saying, if you can still spread it, this whole narrative of you're killing grandma or you're doing this to your family, etc., or trying to guilt people into the collective, acting like Borg and we all have to assimilate, it doesn't really make sense. Now, it makes sense if you just want everyone to take it, and there's different articles about the psychology of COVID and getting people to take the vaccinations. It's interesting that Robert Malone, who's he was warning against like COVID, and he went on Joe Rogan, not COVID, but just raising some alarm bells about some of the stuff with the vaccine, and went on Joe Rogan show and was talking about mass psychosis formation or mass formation psychosis, I think it was, and people were pushing back against him, saying, oh, that's not true, there's no such thing as that, etc. And people were pushing back against that. There was some kind of a joint list they put together to denounce what he said, but some of the people who are writing articles and denouncing what he claimed also wrote articles about the psychology of COVID and how more effective it is to get people to comply if you convince them that it's not just for themselves, but they're saving everyone else. So they needed the guilt and they needed the hero complex to make people comply. And on top of that, that wasn't enough. They had to also ruin your life if you didn't comply. They had to do the OSHA mandates. They did it for employers, and they also did it for the healthcare professionals. The Supreme Court struck. Think of how ridiculous it is that the Supreme Court upheld the one for the medical professionals. And their reasoning was, well, they're getting federal dollars, so they can impose this essentially. So be careful when you get in bed with government, because they can apparently control what you have to put in your body if you take their money. So there's that, but then there's the OSHA mandates that Biden, at first he's like, well, we can't do it. We don't have the power. And then they decided to do it. And then, it got struck down in Supreme Court, thank God. But there are people who lost their jobs. There are people who went ahead and just complied because they were scared of losing their jobs. And they didn't say we're going to force you down and stab you if you don't do it. But if you did not get the jab, people were saying, oh, you'll still have to mask and you'll still have to get testing, which the jobs didn't have to pay for the testing. You might have to do that out of pocket, and they're not cheap. So they were coercing people into it. So people who try to say, oh, no one was forcing you to do it, it's just really not true. It's just really, really not true. People were coercing people into it. I remember folks, again, losing their jobs, people being concerned about losing their jobs, worrying if they were going to, get paid or be at a place in the next week or two, or what would happen. So there was so much confusion. There was so much strife and so much mischief over this vaccine that doesn't actually really prevent the spread. And apparently, Biden and other folks knew it, but they pushed it anyway. And for Pfizer to be like, well, we didn't actually, we had to move at the speed of science, in my accent. No, you didn't. There was no science. There was no, you moved in the science of money, you moved in the science, political science, and now you got the CDC who voted 15-0 to approve and put the COVID vaccine on the childhood list. And not kids certainly don't need it, and didn't make any sense to do this other than the fact that it gives them protection, legal protection, because they have to supply it, make it free for the kids to be able to have it. So they just have protection. So if you have some kind of like vaccine injury, you don't sue the Pfizer, Moderna and stuff. You sue the government. And it's very hard to prove that and get your money. It's possible, but they wanted that protection, and CDC granted them that protection. That's what that was about. I'm not saying that these folks still aren't going to force their kids to take it. They might. If I was a Democrat, I probably wouldn't push that issue because it's going to be really, really bad as far as election. And if I was Tudor Dixon going up against Whitmer tonight, I would certainly bring it up. And I would absolutely not trust anything that Whitmer said anyway. If she said, well, we're not going to make kids do it, I wouldn't trust her. They'd have to put some, she'd have to sign something today. I wouldn't trust her. And even if she signed something, I still wouldn't trust, because these people pushed so hard. They supported Biden and his unconstitutional mandate, and they knew it was unconstitutional. Thank God it got struck down. But they supported crushing your lives. So Ben's all like, oh, people need to be fired, people need to lose their jobs, people need to resign, people need to, etc. And he's like, we all were lied to. And he said it. And so a couple days ago, I saw Tim Pool tweet out an old tweet of Ben. It was a screenshot. And he said something along the lines of, like, you can forgive people for being wrong, but why aren't you angry? And so now Ben today is saying, well, I'm angry, I was lied to. I mean, he's probably genuinely angry. I just think that the timing is interesting. Not in a conspiratorial way. It's just like interesting. So I recall, and again, Ben is saying if he had this information, because he really pushed the vaccine himself, he encouraged it to folks he knew. He got vaccinated for his parents because they were like living together. He's with them, and he didn't want to pass it on to them. But now he's saying that if he had known what he knows today, he's not sure that he would have gotten it. So I think that's really interesting because, and I do like Ben. I'm not trying to just rip on Ben. I do really like Ben. Um, I listen to Ben all the time. I watch Ben all the time. I read Ben. I do like Ben. But Ben said some pretty extraordinary things that really disappointed me very early on when emotions were so heightened. So Ben Shapiro has a list of things that he of times he was wrong, and I wrote an article last year, about a year ago, about a year ago, that said, "Here's my submission for when you were wrong." And so I'm gonna just try to read through it quickly because I don't remember all that's in here. But I was just like thinking about all this. So Ben Shapiro is one of my favorite political commentators. We don't always agree. I'll skip that. On April Fool's Day 2020, Ben posted several tweets that raised a few eyebrows. I love going to synagogue. I go regularly. Don't go to synagogue right now. Don't go to church. The restrictions are temporary, and it is not a violation of the law or morality to stop all gatherings above a certain size, including religious gatherings. These restrictions didn't feel temporary. That's me. Nor were they always implemented in the best interest of Americans. Was it ever scientific to fine church members in Mississippi for listening to sermons in their cars? Churches in New York had to take their grievances all the way to the Supreme Court, just as Neil Gorsuch wrote. It is past time to make plain that while the pandemic poses many grave challenges, there is no world in which the Constitution tolerates color coded executive edicts that reopen liquor stores and bike shops but shutter churches, synagogues, and mosques. Thank God religious liberty was upheld, but it was only a 5-4 ruling. If Republicans hadn't fielded Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg with Amy Coney Barrett last year, we'd have a terrible precedent against the First Amendment. Shapiro continued on. And by the way, if you're a religious person in any stripe, Jew, Christian, Muslim, anyone, and you are insisting on communal events in a time when those events are a serious danger to human life, you are involved in what Jews call Shilu Hashim. I'm sorry, I butchered that, I'm sure, or just desecration of God's name. This is an appeal to authority, which Ben normally shies away from in debates. From my understanding, Jews are representatives of God, and if they're acting in immorality in the presence of others, that's when the such and such occurs. If that's the case, Ben would have to explain to Christians how attending church would dishonor God, especially when they could quote scripture after scripture about healing and faith. Shapiro didn't end there, though. This is not just my opinion. It is the opinion of virtually every major rabbi, pastor, priest, imam, and of whom I'm aware of. So that's what he said. This is an outrageous amount of trust me, bro energy and another failed appeal to authority. Why would you care if someone outside of your religion or denomination disagrees with you? They would have to make a solid case backed by scripture, and pastors widely disagreed with closing churches. Many churches complied with the orders out of respect or fear, but there was a deep division. Pastor Hezekiah Walker received criticism after he condemned Trump for telling churches they were essential. Walker stated he wouldn't open his church until the White House was open, yet he jumped at the opportunity to sing every praise at George Floyd's memorial. Famous leaders don't equate to wisdom or consistency. Governor Kathy Hochul is not allowing church religious exemptions for the vaccine in the state of New York. She says there's not legitimate religious exemptions because the leaders of all organized religions have said there's no legitimate reasons. I can guarantee Hochul never met with all the leaders, asked their opinion, and they came to a consensus that happened to be her opinion. Even still, the Pope can't determine what a sincerely religious held belief is for a member of a small Pentecostal church. And why would peer pressure equate to a moral good? Jesus was condemned to death by consensus. I doubt Ben thinks Hochul is doing a good job, but her reasoning isn't too off from his own. The authorities we accept on this issue agree with us. Ben also tweeted people on the right who are panicking because of onerous and would be unconstitutional in a non-pandemic government measures should stop treating these measures as permanent features of the American landscape, and people on the hard left should stop threatening to make it so. This tweet equates to the finger wagging of an ineffective disciplinarian doomed to be run over by naughty children who love to push boundaries. Slippery slope is a term often uttered by conservatives and more often proved correct. I'm positive Ben knows this. How often does a government give back all power it used during a crisis? They remember how many citizens rolled over and took it. Take California, for example. Why would Gavin Newsom fear the repercussions of mandating vaccines for school children? He was already spared from his recall effort. The best hope for a freedom loving California is to flee the state like Shapiro did. I listen to Ben now, and he complains about the anti-scientific push for mandates from President Biden and other Democrats. The Daily Wire is looking into legal action against Biden's mandates and fines. Ben says if you're vaccinated like him, you shouldn't care what everyone else does. Let them live their life. I agree, but why would they do that? Why would they do what's fair when they can exercise raw power? Liberty is always important, especially during a temporary crisis, because a tyrannical government is a crisis we should always fear. America broke away from an oppressive government. The Declaration of Independence is a list of grievances. The Constitution lays out limitations on the government and even includes the right to bear arms against it. 15 days to slow the spread was not only a massive lie, it opened Pandora's box. I don't know if we can put the greed of the government back in. I believe Shapiro's heart was in the right place, and he followed the science quite extensively as it was made available. His comments were in good faith, but they were still uttered with poor judgment. For those reasons, I submit these tweets to the list of his wrongs. And I still stand by that. So a little different circumstance because those tweets were in regard to the lockdown, but the 15 days to slow the spread were a lie. And Dr. Bricks wrote in her book that they didn't have the data to back up the claims for the 15 days to slow the spread, but they would announce it, and they were just hoping that it would come together to justify it. And she'd have to get other people on board, convince Fauci and folks are like, yeah, we have to do this. And they were managed to convince Trump, who I'm sure didn't want to shut down the economy because it was slamming, but it was during his reelection year. But he also didn't want the death of all these. They're saying all these millions and millions. If they did everything right, millions of people were still going to die. So what other option did they have? Which, by the way, there's still a lot of people who died with COVID and not from COVID. So people lied so much regarding the pandemic. We acted in ways that weren't consistent with other sorts of pathogens like this. And we did something remarkable. And now all these people are being punished for it. We talked the other day about how kids are so far behind in school. Not everywhere, like some places they're on track or whatever, like Florida. Ron DeSantis mentioned it the other day, which I'll play that video. Yeah, when gosh, who said the quote? You guys probably are aware of the quote, but if you surrender your, I mean, I guess I'm paraphrasing because I don't remember it word for word, but if you're willing to surrender your liberty for safety, you'll have neither. That's what people were willing to do. That's what Ben told us to do, and he had the audacity to say you were a bad Christian or bad Jew or bad Muslim. At the time, so I thought at that point in time his thread was pretty outrageous, offensive, and I tweeted at him a lot. He didn't respond. He's a lot of people responding to him. He didn't certainly get to me. And like I said, I would have liked to have been like a fly on the wall listening to some of the debates maybe he had with Michael Knowles, because Michael Knowles seemed to like never really be into the hysteria. I think Matt Walsh was maybe at first, but he broke away certainly closer than faster than Ben did. But once Ben got vaccinated, he kind of didn't care that much about what other people did. Um, so it's still remarkable now. He's just like, I don't know if I would have got vaccinated. So um, it's unfortunate that we have all these institutions that we can't trust, and that uh, Facebook and YouTube has, I'm not Facebook, YouTube has now changed its policies as regarding, as far as I think what stuff they're willing to just take down. Well, actually, I don't know. CDC changed a lot of their policies, so I think I'm more in the clear for what I say now. But I wouldn't expect this video to last on YouTube last year, but or earlier this year, just a couple months ago. Stuff would just get pulled down for misinformation, even though I didn't say anything that was misinformation. But folks tried to tell you. Now again, he was just going by the data that was available to him at the time as he understood it. And they would lay it out on the show, and just a lot of it just wasn't true. And so he feels betrayed, and a lot of people should feel betrayed. I'm glad that people feel betrayed, and I'm glad that people feel angry, but it's like, what are you going to do about it? Now, he's a conservative commentator. I expect that he's on our side anyway, but there's folks on the left who never want to let go and really admit that people were wrong, because they don't like the feeling of being wrong. They don't like the feeling, the revelation of, oh crap, I was a dupe. A dope, and I've been duped. People don't like that. So, but if we could get enough people to sort of wake up and just be like, you know what, I really was lied to, and I don't appreciate it, and so we need some accountability. We could get somewhere. Jake Tapper mentioned the other day, and I played this video, and he said, well, we need to have an actual conversation about school closing. He's like, not to lay blame, but just to kind of like, I'm like, no, we need to lay some blame, Jake. We need to lay some blame, because people had some really bad policies, did some really bad things that didn't follow the science, took advantage of the situation. The whole point of the COVID pandemic and the lockdowns, the shutdowns, all of it was to take advantage of people in their fear. That was the point of it. There were videos of Gavin Newsom and Gretchen Whitmer and other folks saying, hey, we can still implement our agenda with COVID. Yeah, because of COVID. Gaining so much power. Expanding their government control. Transferring wealth. Re-engineering the elections to get the outcome they wanted. Now, that's not me saying that Biden didn't legitimately win, but there is an article by Time magazine that says the shadow campaign that saved the election. Without COVID, without the fear, the panic, hysteria, the way people shut down stuff, like the way the media had the CNN had the death counter, all that stuff. Without it, Trump is still in office today. There would have been no January 6th. All that stuff. Gas would be gone to $5. Which, by the way, Biden said that gas was the national average was $3.49. Not true. At least according to AAA, it's like $3.79. In Michigan, the average is like $4. So I don't know where he's getting his numbers, but wishful thinking, I suppose. But yes, they did lie to us about the COVID vaccine and how necessary it was to end the pandemic. The whole narrative of you're saving your grandma, you're saving everyone else, you need to get it, you're selfish. It's so wild to me. Like, people would say my body, my choice, mockingly, but meaningfully, and mocking to folks. And they're like, well, you can spread COVID, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, oh, but the vaccine doesn't stop the spread. So you want to violate my body autonomy, to make yourself feel better? Because it's not going to stop the spread. And like, well, pregnancy is a disease you can spread. Like, but no, like, if the whole thing is just saving one life, you guys are you're arguing you could deliberately like kill 1 million a year, but you want me to inject something in my body That's not going to stop the spread. And even if it did, I got it, and you caught it from me. The likelihood of you dying is small versus you deliberately going out of your way to kill a child. It just didn't make, nothing made sense in the past 2 years. Nothing made sense in the past 2 years. All they had was their rhetoric and their self-righteousness. And yes, they lied, and many of us tried to tell you. I'm glad folks are angry. I'm glad folks are angry, but what are you going to do about it? That's the question. That is the question. That is the question. Moving on, still kind of the same vein. The pandemic came up during the debate the other night with Ron DeSantis in the governor's race, and it was really wild to me that they tried to spin it as Chris tried to spin it as that Ron DeSantis is a governor lockdown, and I thought Ron had a good answer starting off, and the rebuttal was just dumb.
And I would also say this. You mentioned, Liz, that people are flocking to Florida. That would not have happened if Charlie Crist had his way. He wrote me a letter in July of 2020 saying you need to shut down the state of Florida. He said you need to force people to shelter in their own homes. That would have destroyed the state of Florida. That would have caused our tourism industry to go into the toilet. It would have locked out millions of kids from school. I rejected Charlie Crist's lockdown letter. I kept this state open, and I kept this state free. And we now have the biggest budget surplus in the history of Florida. We have a 2.5% unemployment,
Governor,
second lowest on record, and we just did the biggest tax cut in Florida history.
Thank you, Governor. That's time. Congressman, you have 30 seconds for rebuttal.
Thank you very much. Well, Ron, that's rich. You're the only governor in the history of Florida that's ever shut down our schools. You're the only governor in the history of Florida that shut down our businesses. I never did that as governor. You're the one who's the shutdown guy. We need to have somebody who is at the helm that understands it's important to listen to science, to do what's right, to utilize common sense. You don't just shut down at the outset, and then when it's, politically convenient for you, you want to open back up to store political points for your race for president. That's not right. It's not what the people deserve.
Governor, you have 30 seconds.
Well, so he opposed having kids in school. His supporters sued me to keep the kids out of school in 2020. And how critical was that decision? We just got the nation's report card, the results from all 50 states. Florida, number 3 in 4th grade reading and number 4 in the country in 4th grade math. And if you adjust that for demographics, we are number 1 in the country in both. That would not have happened if we let Charlie Crist and his friends lock our kids out of school like they did in California and like they did in New York. We did it right in Florida.
So everyone knows that Florida wasn't shut down for a super long time, like compared to everyone else. And he was interviewed by Ben Shapiro. I watched their special together, and they're asking about like when did you decide to open up and stuff. And he was just like, I just looked at the data and it didn't make sense. And I was just like, yes. So, but he got trashed by the media, and there were folks like walking the beaches in Grim Reaper costumes and all kinds of crazy stuff. And I guess Crist is correct that he didn't shut down the state, but I guess DeSantis did to some degree. But if Crist was in the pandemic, he would have shut down the state. And Ron DeSantis said he sent me a letter telling me to shut down the state. So it's such a dumb talking point. And that was a rowdy crowd, though. That was a rowdy crowd. I don't even know the Whitmer and Tudor Dixon one. There wasn't like a peep of a noise. I don't know if they had someone in there or not, an audience in there or not. But it was just like, let them speak. Let them speak. Yeah, but it's crazy to think about how much they were going after DeSantis for opening schools, for people being able to go to beaches and out in the sun, on the beach. And that was just horrific to so many people. But we tried to tell you that you guys were silly, that they were stupid. Moving on, Katie Hobbs has a twin sister, and apparently Project Veritas, which they did release a video about Ryan Kelly. I'm sorry, not Ryan Kelly, Mark Kelly, as well. I haven't watched it yet, so I'm not going to play that one. But apparently, it's some staffer talking about how he says he's pro-life, but he's not really pro-life, or he plays both sides. I haven't watched, so I'm not going to play that. But that was like the caption of it. But this one, Katie Hobbs has a twin sister, and she opened up about how the Democrats wanted Kari Lake to be the opponent. And I think this is interesting. We talked about this as we learned that Democrats were investing money in particular right-wing candidates who they think were easier people to beat in the general election. And these election deniers, as they call them, or these Trumpers and so on. So they want them to get through the primary so they can just hammer them in the general election and have their person win. Now, Kari Lake is one of those people who they really wanted to win. And now it looks like Kari Lake's going to be the governor. So I ranted at this at the time, last time we covered this subject, but I would never do what the Democrats did. Like, I know strategy wise, people talk about that and kind of like, oh, I want this person to make it through the general because I think it'll be easy to defeat them. If I feel that someone is really, really dangerous, I would rather not have them make it through the primary. I would not. Even if you feel that they're an easier person to beat, I wouldn't want that. Because if they're that radical, what happens if they just happen to win? And then you're stuck with them as the commander-in-chief or the governor, etc. I would rather them just lose in the primary and have a more moderate Democrat. I don't want them to win. I don't want the Democrat to win. I don't want them to win. But I would rather have a less crazy person be the governor or be the president than have the craziest person who I funded take the presidency. The Democrats, that's why Trump was the president, because they wanted him to be the nominee. That was Hillary Clinton's campaign strategy, which, by the way, Hillary Clinton is saying that the Republicans are going to rig the 2024 race. So we'll talk more about that tomorrow. But they're already preemptively saying an election is rigged, and it's 2 years into the future. Oh, gosh. But she wanted Donald Trump to be the nominee. If you read the WikiLeaks emails, which I certainly did, not every single one, but I read a lot. They wanted the Ted Cruz. They thought was an easy pickings. Gosh, it was his name is escaping me. Ben Carson. And Donald Trump. That was like their three that they thought were like the ones they could take out. They got a lot of media early on, but Trump, nobody more than Trump. But Trump was a person that they really wanted to take out. They really wanted to take out. So yeah, they had all these interviews in all these different places, and they were kind of like, the media obviously still hated him, but they were still like entertaining him and still giving him kind of going stuff. He's on Morning Joe all the time, and then all of a sudden when he was a nominee, it was like Hollywood access tape and this and that, and just raining hellfire down on him. And he ended up prevailing because yes, Hillary Clinton was still that awful. She was still that awful. And people didn't really understand. It was about Trump, but not really about Trump, but also kind of the stuff that he was standing. It was about wanting someone who they felt was going to punch the other guy in the face, because we felt like so much was at stake, and we're like, we don't need some passive mansy-pansy kind of we need like democracy is at risk. We need someone who's going to punch you in the face for democracy, not like literally, but this is figuratively. I don't want to encourage violence, but like all the like free, you saw this college campuses fighting against free speech, all this feminism, like crazy stuff. Like there was some crazy pro-feminist, I mean, like period blood stuff on campuses, and I can't, there was just really weird stuff going on. It was very much a cultural war, and now it's even worse. It's even worse, but they're coming for your kids. So Trump winning, there were so many different levers that had to be pulled to get to that moment. Trump couldn't have won every election. Everyone would have been different, but everything sort of came together for that one, and Hillary Clinton lost. But the point is, if he was so terrible, they shouldn't have wanted him to be the nominee. They should have wanted someone. They were scared of someone like Marco Rubio because they thought he could appeal to mass people. They probably didn't think he was that insane. Now, if he was actually the nominee, they probably would have been like Marco Rubio's throws babies off of rooftops and does a little jig afterwards. Like, they probably would have made up the craziest stuff. It's for Rubio or whoever. But they wanted Donald Trump, and Donald Trump ended up as president. So they didn't learn their lesson. So that was their strategy going into this midterm. So there's Republicans on the ballot that they probably supported that are going to end up winning. So anyway, here's Katie Hobbs' twin sister.
So all across the country, Democrat candidates, not candidates themselves, but the party, was putting money in primaries into the races of the extreme Trump-endorsed candidates, as opposed to the moderate Republicans that were running, because they wanted those extremists to win, because they knew that the Dems had a better chance of winning their races against the extremist candidates than they did against the moderate Republicans.
A fierce gubernatorial race is underway between current Secretary of State Democrat Katie Hobbs and Republican candidate Kari Lake. Our undercover journalist sat with Becky Hobbs, that's Katie Hobbs' twin sister, and uncovered a surprising, if not shocking, national Democrat strategy to help Kari Lake win her primary.
So the Dem Party put money into those extremist races so that would be, and okay, so on election night, on primary night, when we were at Katie's event on primary night, and she didn't know the night of the election who her opponent was going to be, but Karen Taylor Robson was up by 10.
Yeah.
And it was kind of like it took the air out of the room, because everyone knew that Katie was polling better against Kari Lake, and everyone knew that Katie had a better chance to win against Kari Lake. So everyone wanted Kari Lake to be the nominee. So it was kind of like this sigh of relief when Kari Lake actually ended up winning. Yeah. Because Katie, it's a better opponent for her.
Because she's like Trump endorsed. Is that what? Yeah. So it will be easier for her to win.
Right.
This brings into question rhetoric in the news media, urging that democracy itself is at stake in this midterm election. So which is it? Are Trump-backed candidates a genuine threat? Or is it all engineered by the Democratic Party to alter public perception for their benefit? You decide. Reporting from Phoenix, Arizona, this is James O'Keefe with Project Veritas Action.
So good work on Project Veritas, which some of their bombshells, it doesn't seem very bombshelly because we're all kind of like, well, yeah, we knew it. So that was Katie Hobbs admitting something that we already know, that Democrats will try to rig. Well, not rig, but I don't know. You guys could use that phrase, but they maneuver candidates who they think are weaker into the primaries because they've done that before. So they hoping that they'll lose. And so, and I'm not saying Republicans don't do it, but this was like a particularly big strategy in this particular election. And Donald Trump is probably the most famous one. But if these people are so dangerous, you try to just cut them off at the pass, right? You don't uplift them and then hope that everyone's going to come to their senses and not vote for them, because you don't know how your candidate's going to bomb. You don't know what's going to happen to your candidate. Something like medical could happen to your candidate. You just don't know all the reasons why things might not pan out the way that you expect them to. But they wanted Kari Lake. By gosh, they've gotten Kari Lake. Kari Lake is probably going to win that election. We will see. Katie Hobbs is very bad at campaigning. It looks like she's very bad. She doesn't want to debate Kari Lake. I'm not surprised. But Kari Lake is so good with the media that it's obviously hostile toward her. She was in the media herself. She always does these interviews when she's like on Fox, and she has like this glowing sort of Hollywood-esque filter. She's already a beautiful woman. She's very articulate, and she's speaking to issues that parents care about, that people in the state care about. So she's probably going to win. She's probably going to win. And guess what? It's not going to be such a big threat to democracy. It's not going to be the end of the world like Obama and Biden and all these Democrats are saying. It's not going to be in the least bit. And if they really thought that it was, they wouldn't have elevated them to such a high degree. So you get what you want. Kari Lake, you got what you want. Wanted Donald Trump. Always be careful. Always be careful. Always be careful when you have a hand and you don't know what other people are going to play. You just don't know. You're not always going to be able to create a not create, but take advantage of who knows, take advantage of a global pandemic and have every media institution on your side and hide important information when your October surprise drops, like the Hunter Biden story, etc. You're not always going to have that, and I hope you're not always going to be able to do that, because that would just speak more to our system and the harm we've already done. But as I mentioned yesterday, Democrats are talking about the threat to democracy and why do they want to win? They want to win so they can kill the filibuster, because they don't want to work across the aisle and they want to pass really outrageous stuff and get away with it, and they don't want any opposition for it. So they wanted to kill the filibuster. They wanted to change our voting laws, so a lot of federal stuff will overwrite state laws and get rid of things like photo ID requirements, and centralize more of our election process, which makes our election less safe. They also want to, or have talked about, packing the courts. Hillary Clinton, in her video talking about the Supreme Court, she talked about the radical Supreme Court. These people want to pack the Supreme Court so Biden can put in a lot of leftists to outweigh the court right now as it is. That's what they want. So it's they're talking about defending democracy while they want to totally destroy the system and rebuild it in their image. So that's what they're pushing. That's what they want. And it's dangerous. It is absolutely dangerous. While they weaponize the DOJ, which isn't hard to imagine, because Obama, DOJ, or IRS and other stuff, you could say were weaponized at the time as well. So it's just a flashback, except everything is worse. Everything is worse. Anyway, that's the show for today. I'm going to be watching my debate tonight. Not my debate, but my state debate with the governor and the incumbent and the hopeful that we hope wins. That's polling well, going in the right direction anyway. So Tudor Dixon, Gretchen Whitmer. So we'll see how that goes down. Hopefully, Whitmer goes down as well. Like, once again, because she underperformed for sure last time. And I was very surprised with how well Tudor did. So hopefully it's the same repeat. And I don't have my hopes up and gonna come in like, oh gosh, she bombed. But I'm full confidence that we're gonna no, I don't have full confidence. I don't like to get my hopes up. I'm optimistic that she'll do very well tonight and lay out the governor's record, which is atrocious. We'll put it that way. Please go to blacktnews.com. Check out different articles I have on the website. Make sure that you guys are sharing those. Check out different merch that we have at the store, like this Denounce White Supremacy, Defeat Joe Biden shirt. And if you like what I do here, please consider leaving a donation at blacktnews.com. It costs to stream. It costs to run my site. It costs when I make videos to have fancy filters and all kinds of stuff. So if you like all that stuff and you think it's neat, please consider leaving a donation to, cover some of those overheads, costs. And God bless you guys, and I'll see you tomorrow.